So speaking of not watching the doc, I'm curious, like, what is the reason why? It's just like, is it triggering? Is it?
So when they came out, I was like 7 months into my jail sentence, and I was just still coming to terms with like what actually happened and like the gravity of my lies and my crime at that point. And I felt like the stories I was hearing, like we had TV in jail, so it was all like the TMZs and the morning talk shows. So they were dramatizing a lot of the stories. And my initial response was like, fuck you, like that guy was never around, like why is he talking about this? And I was like getting angry, and I think it just wouldn't have been appropriate for me to try and respond at that point. And like thankfully the jail wouldn't let me do anything, but I wasn't ready.
Would you watch like 30 seconds of it?
I think an idea that someone brought to me a couple of weeks ago is that I should do a live stream
Watching
party where I'm watching it with some of the key characters and just like go for 4 hours, crush some tequila, and like watch a doc.
It should do like a fight companion. I know you're a big UFC fan. I don't know if you've seen like these fight companions that like Rogan and Brendan Schaub do, but they'll like watch the fights at the same time and do like a live commentary.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll watch one of those this weekend and get an idea for it.
You should do
fight
that.
companion.
I was gonna ask you to watch 30 seconds, but I won't. I feel like you should save it for your
I want to do this
like
live stream,
like a whole. Because honestly,
I think it's a good idea, like a fight companion comparison. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, like you'd chuck it on TV like this.
Yeah.
Like literally in this setting,
Yeah.
you chuck it on TV, and then like as it's going, you comment on it.
Yeah.
I feel like you would be like pissed half the time.
Yeah.
It's like a weird, the way I watched it like 3-4 years ago when it came out, and then I just rewatched it this morning. And it's like a weird progression. I'd be curious I'll watch your reaction to it, but it's like in the beginning it's like fun and games.
Yeah.
And then the end is like bad.
Really?
Bad. And it gets worse.
So I'm gonna start by thinking, okay, this wasn't as bad.
Yeah, and then by the end,
I'm gonna be
because
pissed.
by the end it gets to the people, and I think that's what's like the hardest part for me. And even when I was thinking the past couple of days, knowing that I was gonna have you on, it's like, what angle did I want to approach this by? Because I watched Nelk and I watched Piers and I watched all these other different appearances you did, and I think at the end of the day, like what I'm curious about is like you, like the person sitting in front of me right now, because I've gone through like an up and down on. Sometimes I'm like, this guy's the biggest con artist of all time. Sometimes I'm like, this guy's actually a nice guy. He just fucked up badly. Sometimes I'm like, fuck, 4 years might not have been enough. Sometimes I'm like, it's fine. What do you think of yourself today?
I think like my emotions have mimicked your exact thought process, but I've had 5 years to like go in that journey. So yeah, it's been a lot of ups and downs. And I think like underlying everything, I just went totally wrong for a period of time. And like however many months or years, whatever it was, like pre-Fyre, where I just like went wrong, there's no making up for that in a certain way. But I think like underlying it, like I'm kind of a pussy in a lot of ways too, and like just want to make everybody happy. So like I think it's complex, and definitely lost my path.
It is complex, and I think for me, what fascinates me from the psychological is the psychological perspective. Is like getting to know you and your brain and how it functions. And there were different themes that came up for me over time. And I think it was one podcast that was great host. I think it's Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
He's a great host.
Oh, he's a savage.
And he was kind of talking about this idea of proving yourself. And when I was listening to that, like I'm not like, if people want to go watch that interview, they 100% should. It's an awesome interview. But I want to take a different angle where it feels like this all could come from a place of insecurity. Do you feel like you were insecure? Do you feel like you are insecure?
Interesting. So I was just talking about this, like not on a podcast the other day with a friend, and I just met up with a couple of my former investors for Fyre that I haven't spoken to or seen in 5 or 6 years. And their initial reaction is like, why do you not have more humility right now because you failed like so much? And I think I started talking to them and thinking about it, and I had like the most fake confidence in the world in the lead up to Fyre. And I was so scared to show that there was anything wrong for fear that people wouldn't like me or wouldn't like want to work on Fyre. And I had 5 years to kind of go through that cycle where I felt like a piece of shit and like worthless, and kind of rebounded from that. And now I feel like I've gained just like real confidence from like the shit eating life experiences I went through. So just interesting seeing from like this investor perspective where the last they saw me like with this overblown fake confidence, and now I have real confidence to a certain extent, and they were trying to get their mind around like that process.
What do they say to you? What did they say to you?
I'm super sheltered in that almost everybody who reaches out to meet with me, who is like an established person, only does so if they have positive intentions. I think we were talking off camera, but most people who have like a life and a family and a business, they're not going to go out of their way to like shit on somebody because they have their own problems and like their own aspirations. So I don't think I really know what like the mood is like amongst like the general people I used to work with, because I'm only hearing from the ones who see some underlying positive.
And so, but when you talk to those investors, is it just like hey, I'm back, or is it for all the ventures that we'll talk about in a second?
It's just more of like apologizing, and I think it's more of like an emotional need, probably on both parts. Like one for me is I want to be forgiven one day, and it's not going to happen like this year or next year. And I think for them is they want to come to terms with like why they were misled or why it went so wrong. So I think both sides kind of have that emotional need, and it'll take years to rebuild.
And are there any of them that say that they would invest in any one of your ventures again?
I think like, yes, but I've stopped those conversations. Like I'm not here for the financial talk with like a former investor. I think it's like, I'm sure I'm doing it a lot of my own emotional needs too, but I think like that's what I'm trying to seek rather than money.
And speaking of those emotional needs, like what do you feel like today are your emotional needs?
I feel like the people who backed me since I was like 19 or 20, then when I came to them 4 or 5 years later for Fyre and said, hey guys, like you've seen me fail and succeed in little ways for 5 or 6 years. Like this is bigger. Like please like up your check size. And they did it without question. That trust I violated, I think, was the worst crime. And those are the people that I think like the most hollow, meaning that I need to like make it up to them and show that I'm not as bad as I was for that period of time when I abused their trust.
Right. I think also in watching the doc again, the two groups of people that I think stood out to me as the ones that I hope that at the end of the day find the most comfort emotionally and financially are your Fyre staff, like the team, Fyre Media, I think is what it's called.
Yep.
And then you'll see in the doc, I think it's these two people from the Bahamas workers. Colombo, I think is one of his names. Maybe, or there's one, you'll see at the end, he's the last image, and I think he's one of like the people that was like managing the other people.
Okay.
I don't know if his name is Colombo. And then there's a woman. This one was, I think, really the most heartbreaking was the one, she was like kind of like feeding the workers.
Yep.
And she had a restaurant there and like used a lot of her savings. I think at the end of the day, those are, investors obviously is important.
Yeah.
But like those are the people that I feel like you can redeem yourself with the most. Yeah. And I think those are the ones that matter, right? Because, not to like, I'm in the process of starting my own company right now, a startup as well, and your team is everything. And I think you know that as well.
For sure.
And I feel like, I don't know, do you feel like is it hard to let down your team in that sense?
There's a lot there. It's a lot to unpack. I think the people who are working and are legitimately owed, that's super, super important to me. I never met the lady with the restaurant. Right. I've obviously heard stories about it. Yeah. But, if she is owed, like getting her paid is very, very important to me. And like getting everybody in the Bahamas who's owed paid, it's going to happen soon. So like I'm doing it. I have a lot of like ventures in place for the sole purpose of making that happen. I think the team is just like such a clusterfuck in like my mind, and just going through my remorse process, like workers who weren't paid, totally fucked up. I need to dedicate my life to paying them. People like investors I lied to, totally fucked up. I deserve to be punished, go to jail, whatever else happened. Like I need all of that because I was totally wrong. I just feel like I was attracting a lot of bad people on my team who were in it for like, they wanted the shortcut of being famous. They wanted the shortcut of experiences that they hadn't yet earned in their life. And so I had a lot of shitty people working with me. Not to say that I wasn't underlyingly wrong and guilty for everything and like owed them in some capacity, but just like attracted a lot of scumbags based on my scumbag behavior at the time.
Right. I was about to say, like, couldn't somebody make the argument that you were also trying to find those shortcuts to fame as well?
100%. And like, so like my behavior just attracted people who shared similar mentality. And what's so crazy is like now having like no money, I'm able to find like such better people to work with because I think I'm finding people who are more in it for like the process and the camaraderie rather than like how can they find a jet with a model to the Bahamas tomorrow before they've like actually made it that far in their life.
And I think too, what's interesting about you is like some people say they experience highs and lows. Like you literally experience the highest highs being on a beach with Bella Hadid and God knows whoever else. Yeah. To being in solitary confinement. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram at felix.levine. And if you have something to say, please leave a comment.